Benefits 101. All right, so we'll wait a few minutes and then we'll get right on into it. We can see you coming in. Again, we thank you for joining us. It's good information. We thank Consolidated Planning Group for inviting us. My name is Gail Wright. I'm with Partners Resource Network. I'm the regional coordinator for the ESC area that I cover. We serve parents of children with disabilities. Our mission is to empower parents of children and youth with disability in their roles as parents, decision making, and advocates for their children. Coming in. Good information, good information.
Well, thank you, Gail. Thanks for having us here today, and thank you for everybody joining us this Tuesday. It kind of feels like a Monday again with our all of our holidays. So we're back at it. I'm Allison Schaberg, Consolidated Planning Group, and I am super happy to be here with you. For those of you that are joining us for the very first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. From a person, I am a mom. I'm a mom to 4. I've got 2 kids with special needs. I've got one that's still a minor and one that has crossed over into adulthood. And so from a personal perspective, from a parent perspective, this stuff is hard. It's hard. Our lives are hard anyway. You've got all these full-time jobs, mom, worker, spouse, all these things going on. And then trying to navigate all of this seems just like one more plate we've got, twirling in the air. And so I would say, I know this stuff. I know this stuff backward and forwards. This is what I eat, sleep, and breathe, and I do for a living. But what I will say is that as I was going through this myself, with my own child, as she was turning 18, as she was, becoming an adult and kind of going through these things, it was difficult. So Consolidated Planning Group, we are a holistic special needs financial planning firm. And I say that because there seems to be some confusion a lot of times on when it comes to a special needs planner versus a special needs attorney. Do they both do the same things? And, your situation is specialized. So when it comes to special needs planning, you usually need both. You need a special needs planner. They're the money side. They're the financial side. They're making sure you have the money in the right buckets, making sure that there's enough money in the future for future care for your loved one. And on the legal side, you need a special needs planning attorney, sometimes an estate planning attorney that is going to help you get those legal documents in place that are necessary, which we'll talk more about today. So some of the things that guardianship, special needs trust, things like that. But today, what we're going to be talking about is Government Benefits 101. And there's a lot of things when it comes to special needs planning that are, relatively confusing and stump a lot of people. But I think, when we start talking about SSI, SSDI, Medicare, Medicaid, we start kind of throwing all those terms around. For most of us, it kind of all goes together. Like we don't even know the differences. We know them, but it's kind of hard navigating all of this. And for a lot of us, we've been going along this path for many, many years, and our children with disabilities haven't qualified for anything. You simply just made too much money. It was basically based off of your assets, and so you didn't necessarily magically know that when your child turned 18 that everything changed and what you knew once before isn't the case anymore. So we're going to be talking about all of that. Consolidated Planning Group, we're out of Sugar Land. We serve families all across the state of Texas, but really all across the U.S., 27 years of experience. We're an advisory and consulting firm, so we really custom design plans for our families that we work with based off of their unique situation. And honestly, every family we work with, the situation is a little bit different. The wishes and goals are different, and we are able to customize solutions that way. So first things first, what are we going to talk about when we're talking about Government Benefits 101? How will your child's care be funded? So it's clear that when it comes to SSI, and Medicaid, SSDI, it is a critical piece in the equation of funding future care, current and future care for your children. There's a lot of other places and things that need to be offset, but SSI and Medicaid. So let's start there. Let's talk about that. So supplemental security income is what SSI stands for, and so this is a means test. And so basically, if you have ever been angered because your child is clearly disabled and you applied for SSI and Medicaid and you got denied, the reason that you got denied was not likely because they were saying that your child wasn't disabled, but it was more likely because you didn't qualify from a means perspective. So basically, the bottom line is if you have assets more than $2,000, if you're single, more than $2,000, you can have one car and you can have one house. If you're a married couple, you can have assets up to $3,000 in addition to one car and one house. Now, there's some things we can get in the weeds on this, so that if you have a car and it's 10 years old and you have a lien on it, and there's like all these ifs and buts, right, that they might allow you to have two cars, but it's basically one car, one house. And it's not one car, one house, plus we have this land. Those types of things. So again, most families don't qualify for the entire time your child is growing up. And so then basically what happens is whenever they turn 18, even though they still live in your household, it's based off of their means, not yours. So this is where it is important to be mindful of money in their names. It could be a CD that Grandpa bought when he was one, things like that. When there was gifts and the kids didn't really need a gift, and somebody bought, they maybe got them shares in a mutual fund or a savings bond or something like that. So it's important to make sure that there's not more than $2,000 assets in their name. So what if they do have more than that? Okay, so because that always comes up. And so there is no such thing. We're not hiding money from the government. You don't hide it or get rid of it or things like that, but you can spend it down. Our kids do have care needs. They might need a new iPhone. They might need a new computer because they're doing online learning or their computer crashed. They may have outside therapy costs that are very expensive, and you're doing all this out-of-pocket stuff. So if you're spending down and you need to have less than $2,000, just keep accurate records of that and what it was for, and then that will be fine. So that's one way to go about doing it, and we're going to talk about some other ways as well. So then what we have is we've got SSDI and RSDI and Medicare based off of a work record. So the first one is based off of means, and the SSDI is based off of a work record paid into Social Security. So we've also seen people where they say, well, I applied for Social Security disability for my disabled child, and then they get the first letter in the mail, and it's usually from the Social Security Administration, it's not SSI, and it's basically saying that they're denied. And so I've actually had people cry. They're upset. They're so insulted that you could actually suggest that my child isn't disabled. Are you kidding me? But what is happening is your child hasn't worked. They don't have any work quarters. So they're being denied SSDI, rightfully so. You should expect them to be denied SSDI unless they have work quarters. And there are some other unless you, the parent, mom or dad, is either already retired themselves through the Social Security Administration, or they're already disabled themselves through the Social Security Administration. So once SSDI or RSDI, and we're going to go deeper with this, kicks in, Medicare is available after 2 years. You're eligible for Medicare. So SSI comes with Medicaid, and that's a whole other can of worms. I believe there's at least 100 various Medicaid programs out there in the state of Texas. So there's all kinds of things that you may qualify for, but just fundamentally, Medicaid comes with SSI. I forgot to mention today that today's presentation is being recorded, and you guys, your cameras and your audios are muted today, so we can't hear you and we can't see you. We know you're there, but if you have questions, we do want you to put them in the chat box today, and Gail will be monitoring the chat box, and we'll get to just as many questions as we can. All right. So let's talk about when you should apply and what do you need to apply for. So you're going to want to apply for SSI the month of your child's 18th birthday. And the appointment should be scheduled a few months in advance. I've heard people say call as much as 6 months in advance. I would say that might be a little excessive. I think 3 months in advance is a good time. And what you're doing is you're calling to schedule the appointment for the month that your child turns 18. So it doesn't actually have to be after their physical day. So if their birthday is July the 6th, it doesn't have to be after July the 6th. You could, anytime during the month of July, you can schedule that, okay? But what you don't want to do is wait till July to call, because it very well could be 2 to 3 months. Some offices are busier than others. Some offices are better than others when it comes to the Social Security offices and how they are run. And so I know that all of you have friends, and you have friends that have kids with disabilities as well, and maybe they've navigated some of these waters along the way. Two, you might kind of just poke around and see which some of the better offices are in or around the area in which you live, because once you get started with an office, you're stuck with that office. So if you happen to pick the worst Social Security office in the area, which I won't mention which one it is, but you're stuck with them, and then and it's very hard to deal with them. So do a little homework on that. I do suggest that you have the evidence that also demonstrates that the child's disability began before age 22. And this has to do with them being able to qualify for a disabled adult child, also referred to as a DAC, on one of the parents' records. So we have all kinds of acronyms, but a DAC is one that has been used for many years. And in fact, I think they've updated it recently, and nobody has switched over. DAC sticks, right? So a disabled adult child under a parent's record. And so why does this matter? And this matters a lot. So first, let me tell you that if you're not late to the party, it's okay. I don't care how old your child is, okay? So it's not, did you apply prior to the child turning age 22. It's, do you have evidence documenting that the disability began prior to age 22 to qualify as a DAC? And why we want our disabled adult children to qualify as a DAC is basically they are going to be able to qualify for RSDI later. So they don't have a work record. We're not anticipating that they're going to work, so they could never qualify for RSD or SSDI over here. But basically, if they're a DAC, a disabled adult child under a parent's record, so this is after they've turned 18, then they can qualify for RSDI benefits under a parent's record, and that will even remain after the parent is deceased. So that's why this is so critically important. And remember that the RSDI, SSDI, Social Security, SSDI, RSDI, that's kind of the Social Security side of the house. And then we have SSI, and they throw around these terms, and it's just so confusing of what's what. But Medicaid, Medicare, SSI, SSDI, it's enough to make everybody crazy. So as you're getting ready, what do you need to do to prepare? So first, don't overwhelm yourself with preparing, because they're going to get records, okay? But what I would say is if you have the medical history, history of diagnosis, physicians' names, addresses, phone numbers, diagnosis history, medication, which that sounds like a lot, but most of us have all that relatively together anyway. Include, your PCP, if there's a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a neurologist, anything that's relevant to your child's condition, gather that together, because that's going to be helpful in your application. And it's also the more together you are, the quicker the process is going to go. And so I tell people to plan on the process. This is not a fast process. It's just not. But you could plan on 3 to 6 months. And if it's done during that time, you should count it as a win. And it could be longer. But the more you have things together, the better it's going to be. The other thing that I always recommend, and this is just a suggestion, and this is something that I did with one of my own kids, consider chatting with the PCP first and reviewing what their records say. So what I know is that medical records have mistakes all the time. We went to a phase of digital medical records several years ago, and there's mistakes in them. They kind of go through them fast. So when I said, I'm going to be applying for SSI, and they're going to request your records, and I wanted to see, when you get these requests, what would you be sending in, for her? And there was mistakes on there. So I was glad I did it. I was able to talk to the doctor and say, hey, look, here's the mistakes, and this is what I need corrected. And so it was, I don't know, it was worth the 10 or 20 minutes that it took me to do that. Okay. So this is your friend. This is the Social Security Blue Book. You may have never heard of it. So again, it's called the Social Security Blue Book, and it's basically an impairment guide that the Social Security Administration uses to determine what is going to be determined as a disability, and what do you have to prove. Okay. So basically they are categorized by, it could be a neurological disorder, it could be a psychological disorder, it could be all kinds of different disorders, cardiac, oncology, it could be anything. But you basically go in and you look and see what those diagnoses are, what your child's diagnoses are, and find out what it is that you have to prove for them to be disabled. Okay. And so it's just good to look at this. You don't have to read the whole thing. I think, some of us have kids with more than one disability. They've got multiple, and it may be one and not the other that causes them to be considered disabled. So you kind of want to look in those particular sections. But ask yourself, if you've reviewed your doctor's records that they would send to SSI, if this is the Blue Book, I work for the Social Security Administration, and this is the Blue Book, and this is what I have to determine, does the record clearly state? Like, for instance, one of mine for my daughter was to be able to show disorganization of more than 2 limbs, right? Hands, feet, arms, legs, whatever. And so asking myself, does this record indicate that? Does this record show the impairment of what she can or cannot do? And so that's where you may want to work with your physician on this. So look this up. You can find this online. You can download it. There may be earlier versions. I think that this one actually may be in a PDF. It used to be in a PDF, and it was easily to kind of search the diagnosis and stuff, but I think they've changed it up a little bit. But check that out. And again, it's the Social Security Blue Book. Okay, so there are some people that are going to, and you can, these are things that you can Google, that what is the presumptive disability conditions? Okay, this is not an all-inclusive list, but this is a list of, there are some conditions that our kids can have that make them presumptively disabled under the Social Security Administration. So some of them, a lot of our kids fall into the category of IDD, the intellectual disability, and we see a lot of Down syndrome, things like that. I mean, it's all across the board, but those are some of the presumptive ones. And so basically when it's presumptive, that it's going to go, the whole process is going to go a lot smoother. And so basically you can get, while they're making the decision, you can get up to 6 months of SSI based on disability if you have one of these, basically 15 conditions. And that decision is made by the Social Security Administration. But again, it's not a secret. You can Google that and find out what the presumptive conditions are and if your child falls into that category. But the bottom line is if there is a likelihood that the case will be approved, then they can make that presumptive decision and get paying you right away. So if you've had friends that say, well, we applied and it was approved in 2 weeks or something, if you've ever heard somebody say that and you're like, are you kidding me? I'm on month 5. That might be why that they may have had a presumptive condition and your child did not. Okay. All right. So we were spending a little bit of time and we were talking about SSDI, also called Social Security. Also, we are also talking about RSDI. So when a parent retires or becomes disabled or passes away, okay? So when a parent applies to receive their own Social Security benefit or disability, the disabled adult child, we were talking about the DAC earlier, is also entitled to receive half of the parent's benefit. So this benefit applies also to minor children that are not disabled. So when we were talking earlier about SSI, right now SSI is $794 a month. So if they're paying for rent or housing, they get their full benefit is $794 a month. And I think it's $529 if they're not paying rent. If they're getting kind of that deducted because they're not paying rent, then I think the benefit's $529 a month. But what happens is when a parent retires, so your child turns 18 and they qualify for SSI and Medicaid. As a parent, you're still working full time. You're not retired. There's nobody disabled. So your child just clips along on the SSI monthly and the Medicaid, until which time you or the spouse or the parent, the other parent, retires or goes on disability. And that's when they're going to kind of do an analysis of what is more. So in the example, just for a clean example, if your Social Security benefit at your full retirement age is $3,000 a month, then your disabled adult child would be entitled to $1,500, and it doesn't make your benefit go down. They'll basically switch over because the $1,500 is more than the $794 a month. They'll basically switch over to the RSDI, and so their monthly amount will be increased. And then after 2 years, they'll be eligible for Medicare, so they'll keep their Medicaid. They'll be dual eligible, or a concurrent enrollee is basically the terminology. So again, 24 months after the Title II benefits, they'll be eligible for Medicare. So this is when you, mom or dad, retire or go on disability. This is when this happens. So this is why we want. Yes.
There was a question. Someone says, how can I make sure that my child does not lose the SSI benefit?
So making sure that your child doesn't lose the SSI benefit. So you never get, well, I don't want to say you never get both, because you actually can, because sometimes the 50% of the parent's record is not more than SSI. So SSI still pays, but it might have some RSDI that is also paying. But we are going to talk about having the money in the right buckets to not lose the SSI. I mean, I think the key thing for not losing SSI is not having too much money and not having are having money basically in the wrong buckets. There are two basic places that you can have money as it relates to SSI above and beyond those $2,000 that I was talking about. And that's going to be an ABLE account and a special needs trust, but we're going to talk about that. So one thing that's important to note here is, so when you have your child, this disabled adult child, on a parent's record, and you've turned on benefits, upon the death of a parent, the disabled adult child that was getting 50% of the parent's record is going to be increased to 75%, and that is going to be for as long as your loved one lives. So you die, they're going to be bumped up from 50% to 75% of your benefit for the rest of your loved one's life. So that's nice to know, and of course they keep their Medicare. So a couple of things, couple of questions that always come up, and I see we may have some other ones too. One question that always comes up is, if I delay taking my Social Security, if I delay my retirement through Social Security, will my child's benefit be increased? And so the answer is yes and no, and so it's kind of a double edge here. So if your first eligibility for Social Security is 62 and you take it at 62, you are taking a permanent reduction in your own Social Security, and that reduction will be reflected permanently in your child's as well, okay? If you take your benefits at your full retirement age, and for just sake of simplicity, we're going to say that your full retirement age is age 67, okay? Again, each year you delayed delayed it from 62 to 67, your benefits are increasing 8% a year. So there is a real benefit in waiting till your full retirement age. But the question always comes up, if I wait till age 70, I don't really need the money. If I wait till age 70, will my child's benefit be increased based off of that number? And the answer is no. So if you wait to take your Social Security from age 67 and you push it to 70, your benefit is going to increase 8% per year. But your disabled adult child's benefit is going to be based off of your full retirement age of what that would have been if you delay it past your full retirement age. Okay, so last thing on this before we go to a couple more questions, Gail, is you just got to beware of family maximums. I'm not going to get into the weeds with this because you can Google this, but there is a family maximum if there is a non-working spouse also drawing from a spousal record. And this also may be confusing if we have two disabled adult children under a parent's record. You do have the flexibility to flop back and forth on the higher parent's record. And so if you do have two children in the household with disabilities, one could be on one parent's record, one could be on the other. I mean, there are some workarounds on that. There is, and you can kind of research this a little bit, but if you have a step parent situation, maybe the step parent's record is greater. There is a such thing as being a disabled adult child under a step parent's record. And then also, I've also seen where we've had guardianship, we've had grandparents that actually had guardianship of the children. There are scenarios in that way where they may be able to be a disabled adult child in that situation as well. All right, do we have some additional questions?
We do. A question says, why does my child not qualify for disability because I'm receiving VA disability benefits?
So that's a loaded question, and it depends on if your child is a child or if your child is an adult and they're 18 or older. So again, that not qualifying for, it just depends on income. So SSI is going to be dependent on the income. And again, it's $2,000 assets, one house, one car. Married couples, $3,000 assets, one house, one car. So if you have more than that, that might be why they didn't qualify for SSI and Medicaid. And the reason they didn't qualify for disability is because the disability system is strictly you earn working quarters. As you're working, they're earning working quarters, and a child has not paid into a working quarter system. So they won't be eligible for these benefits that I was just talking about, disability, until they turn 18 or older, and the parent has already retired or become disabled themselves. That's when they'll switch over to the disability side. Any additional questions? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. VA disability and SSI disability are two different systems.
So, and we're not talking about the VA disability at this time. We're not nothing in this presentation is discussing the VA disability. And the VA disability, kind of a VA disability is typically the veteran themselves. So, it's usually a little bit different. Okay. Any other questions, Gail, before we move on? Okay. So Title II programs and the acronyms never end. They never ever end. And it's hard. And I know we've been throwing a lot of them around even in this meeting. So SSA, the Social Security Retirement System, RSDI, retirement survivors and disability insurance. So again, retirement survivors, disability insurance. So if a parent dies, it's RSDI. If a parent retires, it's RSDI. If a parent is disabled, it's RSDI. Okay. SSDI, or Social Security Disability Insurance, that is the worker. okay? The worker, you're earning working quarters, and the magic number is 40 quarters, and it actually is graduated. I mean, for younger people, they have less quarters that, you know, during certain, you know, up to this age, you can have 6 quarters, up to this age, you can have this many quarters, but a full record is 40 quarters, which is basically 10 years, okay? So again, that's the worker for the SSDI. We talked about the DAC, which is the disabled adult child. And then we have DWB, which is disabled widower benefits. Okay, so there are widow benefits for spouses as well. So, and another term that we hear commonly is a beneficiary. An adult receiving Title II benefits is considered a beneficiary. Okay. So to be entitled to SSDI, this is the Social Security, also known as, that's the problem, is they have 3 names for everything and they just throw them around, and that's why it's confusing. So SSDI and Social Security Disability Insurance. So to be entitled, you're going to file an application. You're going to be found to be medically disabled. You have to be fully insured, and that means you have to have been a worker with working quarters. That's what that means. So it's confusing, but that's what it means. Is an insured for disability status, and is not working, or working but countable earned income is less than what the Social Security Administration considers substantial gainful activity, which is $13.10 per month. Okay, so that is kind of how you're going to go that route. Okay, so to be entitled to the RSDI, this is the Retirement Survivor Disability Insurance. The child is 18 years of age or older. The disability began prior to age 22, is a dependent of the insured worker. So this is a minor, so that's a dependent of the insured worker. So that is kind of counteracts. So the 18 years or older is on one side of the house, and that's if they were a disabled adult child. But if we have other children that are not disabled and they're a dependent, then they would also be covered, minor children. They are not married, and they have not previously performed substantial gainful activity, or if they have, you have sufficient proof of why they can't now, how they once could and now they can't. You have sufficient proof for that. Okay, so we talked about the blue book. Now we're going to talk about the red book. The red book is basically it's a huge book, and it's a general reference source about employment and provisions as it relates to working and getting Social Security disability. And supplemental security income. So there's a whole bunch of different programs out there. We've done webinars before on this, you know, for VR. I mean, like VR services and things like that. There's a lot of different programs that are out there. And there is a lot of confusion on I can't work, or I should work, or I'm going to lose the benefits. How do I not mess this up? And a lot of these programs are designed to get people that can go to work to go to work, but they're also designed to give you a try, like a trial. So they found your loved one to be disabled for a reason, because they're disabled. And a disabled person still has hopes and dreams, and they still want to do things, and they want to try their hand at things, and they might be really good at things. We've seen people, you know, be very successful at a lot of different things. But we've also seen where the disabled adult child tried and they couldn't do it, or they tried and they couldn't work full time. It was never substantial and gainful. It was never more than $13.10 a month. They never worked anywhere more than a month because they always got fired, or there were social issues, or we could go on and on and on about the issues. You guys already know them. But basically, this book is the general guide of how not to screw it up and how to try your hand at getting your loved one to work, and how it's not going to just automatically disqualify you. So yes, you know, with working with SSI is reduced, but so if SSI is reduced, and they're making $1,000 a month versus $794 a month, and you're still getting Medicaid, who cares? More is more, right? And if they're working and they can work and they're building quarters and they can kind of get this moving, I think it's just worth checking into. So there's a such thing as a trial work period, a 9-month trial work period that you have through the Social Security Administration. The Red Book is going to talk about that. But this is super important. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that your application, when you apply, your child turns 18, you're going to apply the month that they turn 18, and they're already working, your application is going to be automatically denied. I need you to know that, okay? Just right off the bat, if your child is working, when you apply for SSI, they are going to be denied right off the bat. It doesn't mean that they can't work in the future. I'm just saying that if they are working, it will be denied. So you should be aware of that. And so again, before you go down the highway, there are all of these services and programs and helping your children get to work and all of these things, like all kinds of testing and programs and training and things like that. There's a lot of services in Texas. But before you go down that highway, you have to understand what the impact is. And I would say usually, again, if they can have substantial gainful employment and they can enjoy what they're doing, then that is certainly better than relying on SSI. So SSI at $794 a month, nobody's getting rich off that. It's barely enough to pay any rent. And, it doesn't cover anybody's monthly expenses by any stretch of the imagination, even if they live really small. So if there are other opportunities out there and they can try it without messing everything up, I'm just a proponent of that, because I've just really heard so many people not doing anything, or their kids that come out of the public school, they graduate at 18 or 22 and they go home and they do nothing. They're not in any programs. They're not trying to work. They're not getting any vocational training or anything like that. And I just want you to know it's out there. So read that book. And it's a lot, but it's good. It's really good information. Do we have some additional questions?
We have a question. Does employment impact RSDI benefits?
So employment, so for the RSDI benefits, not necessarily, but it's kind of a loaded question, because it can, as it relates to waivers, if you have too much income coming in. So we do have people that have switched over from SSI to RSDI. They're worried that the RSDI is going to be too much because they may be getting HCS or class or Texas Home Living. And there's a difference between unearned income and earned income. So I hope that answers that question. It kind of it's different. It is different. So if you're getting SSDI yourself on your own work record, then there's the substantial gainful employment, and the numbers are different. So this is where you get in the weeds with this on the Red Book. We could probably have a whole presentation on the Red Book, but there are different numbers for SSI and earning income and how that works, and then SSDI. But the survivors, if you're earning over the substantial gainful employment, then you could come off of the RSDI. Okay, so if you're able to earn enough money on your own work record, so there are limits, but you can earn some. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is protecting benefits and government benefits. So basically, what we got to do here is we just got to make sure that you have your money in the right buckets and your child's assets in the right buckets. That's basically the first things first. We want to ensure that a special needs family member's name is not set up as a beneficiary on any life insurance, investment, or bank accounts. We also want to ensure that well-meaning family members do not leave assets to the named individual as opposed to a third-party trust for the benefit of the special needs family member. So I'm going to say this again. I'm not trying to be repetitive, but I try to mention this on every call, because every week we talk to people, and so if you've done it, you're not dumb. You're not alone. People don't know, but basically, what a lot of people do is they say, "Okay, I have life insurance, and if I die, my spouse is going to get the money. And if I die and my spouse is already dead and gone, then I'm going to leave it to my children equally." Okay, that's a very common thing that people do, and maybe you've done that. But there is a fundamental problem with this, and it's twofold. It's number one, if you have minor children that aren't disabled and you leave it to them, then the money sits in trust until they turn 18, and then they get all of the money, which is a horrible idea because no 18-year-old is ready to get large amounts of money. It doesn't go well. Okay, so that's a bad idea. But when it comes to a special needs trust, to a special needs child, if we don't leave it to a special needs trust, then we're automatically going to disqualify them for SSI and Medicaid because they're going to have more money than the $2,000 that I was talking about. Okay, so it's not, okay, well, I'm just going to leave everything to my sister and she can sort it out, which I've heard stuff like that before. People say that. But how we do it is we leave it in either a special needs trust or a testamentary special needs trust for your disabled child, and then it won't be counted against them from SSI from an SSI perspective. And then as it relates to your other children that are not disabled, typically what we see is we see a testamentary trust, or there is a trust for the other kids, and the trust spells out how and when they get the money, so they're not getting large sums of money when they turn 18. Gail, we have another question? I've got you on mute right now.
Right, there are a couple of questions. One is, what if a family member has a family trust and money is being left to a group of family members? When the person passes away, then we can create a special needs trust fund for that money to go into?
So that is, I would defer that to an attorney on that one. So typically it needs to be left to a special needs trust. Okay, so if it's going to a special needs child, it needs to go to a special needs trust. If it went to a regular trust and the trust wanted to make a distribution to a special needs trust later, they can technically do that. But what we have to be careful of is what I was explaining about, like leaving it. So in the example, let's say, and I've actually had people that this have happened to, that they've called me and said, what do I do? Where a family member died and the life insurance was left to the special needs trust. What do I do? To the kid, the special needs child. Now what? I just won't take the money. Well, you can't just not take the money. Like if it was left to the child, then it was left to the child. But this is where you're going to have to hire an attorney. And in this example, that money would have to go into you'd have to petition the courts and they'd have to set it up, but it would actually have to go into a first party special needs trust as opposed to a third party. So that's that. The special needs child's individual money is a first party trust. A third party is when we leave money to that. There's no Medicaid payback on a third party trust. So ideally, you're setting it up right on the front end and not trying to pick up the pieces on the back end. It still can be done. It's more expensive, and there is a Medicaid payback on the first party special needs trust. Do we have another question?
Yes, as I am a transition specialist with the school district, I'm working with TWC to get our campers as paid job sites. The students are paid, but they will have a job coach. They will make $10 an hour and work 20 hours a week for a 12-week period. They will move to a different campus for a different job site. Does this impact the Social Security SSI for our kids? Does it negatively impact?
Okay, so there is now it's 18 to 22 is the timeline. There is so you're talking about the summer earn and learn program. I'm familiar with that program. And so if they're under 18 and they're getting SSI, a lot of our families, that's not the case. Their kids don't qualify for SSI until they're 18. But if they're 18 to 22 and they are a full-time student, you have to ask the Social Security Administration to apply the earned income exclusion to the record. So if a person is a full-time student, they're between the ages of 18 and 22, there is an earned income exclusion to where they can actually earn that money and their SSI would not be reduced, but you have to ask for it. They're not going to offer this to you. They're not going to tell you. It is an earned income exclusion. You have to show proof of your full-time student enrollment, and it has to be signed and it has to be accepted. and it has to be sent into the Social Security Administration and applied to the record. And if it's not applied to the record, then their earnings will be reduced. Furthermore, if your students are getting SSI already, it is imperative that they report. So VR talks to the vocational rehab actually does talk to the Social Security Administration. Okay, so they know that's one of those Medicaid programs. Like they know, like they kind of talk to each other that they're in the program. They get notified. But it is also the student's responsibility to report their earnings monthly. So the first of every month, they're supposed to report their earnings. There's a portal they can log in and do it. There's a fax number where they can fax their pay stubs, and they can't email it. But so basically, the portal and faxing in, I guess you could mail it in, which I don't recommend because the Social Security offices are only, working by phone still. So, but it is very, very important that they report those earnings, because what could happen is that they could be getting those checks and they keep cashing those checks. And then the Social Security Administration most definitely will catch up with you, and then you'll be in a situation where you owe them money. And that's never a good situation. Do we have additional questions?
Yes, we do. If there's a bank account in our child's name right now, should we close it? And does that disqualify us from government benefits in the future?
So, I think it's okay. So if you have an account in the child's name, I think it's okay. I mean, you can close it if you want to. If there's more than $2,000 in it, again, we're not hiding money. Okay. It's, it's spending down on the child's needs, whatever those needs are. And having adequate proof of what you spent that on. Was it, prescription drugs? Was it therapy? Medical co-pays? Maybe it's their portion of insurance. Maybe it's the iPhone. Maybe it's a computer. Maybe it's a car. I don't know. There's a million things. I can think of a million things that there's never enough, right? So just, you can spend that down and just make sure that there's not more accounts that have over $2,000 in it.
Can you have an insurance policy left to a trust?
Yeah, that is exactly what we suggest. So basically, when it comes to funding care for a special needs loved one, you can have life insurance or other assets. We can have an ABLE account. We can have a special needs trust. So basically, as a special needs trust, you can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust, and oftentimes current life insurance or assets provide funding for the special needs trust. So basically, in that example, I have a life insurance policy. It's on my life. And if something happens to me, it funds a special needs trust for my child. The death benefit proceeds are paid directly, and it would say third-party special needs trust for the benefit of in the child's name. So it's not leaving it directly, it's leaving it to the special needs trust. So that's how you would do that. And so the ABLE account is another account that you can have that will not disqualify you for SSI. You can put up to $15,000 a year. So if you've got more money in accounts than where they should be, there's money that can be moved to an ABLE account. There's other things like that can happen. You can put up to $15,000 a year into an ABLE account. You can have a total of $100,000 in the ABLE account before you disqualify from SSI and Medicaid. So the beneficiaries, the account owner, income earned is not tax deductible. Contributions are not deductible. The income earned is not taxable, and then your contributions are not deductible, but it doesn't jeopardize SSI and Medicaid. So this is a 529A ABLE. We've heard of 529Cs for college. So it's under the same tax code, but then it was written for people with disabilities. Couple of other things that you got to keep in mind with this is the disability had to start prior to age 26 to be eligible for an ABLE account. We talked about the $15,000 and $100,000. If the individual is working, there could be an additional $12,490 a year put into the ABLE account. It is basically like a 529 plan, the distributions for qualified disability expenses, which are basically, if it can be construed of achieving a better life for an individual with disability, you can basically pay for it out of an ABLE account, okay? And then there's tax-free growth and investments that can be changed each year by the participant, and you could roll it over to another family member who is eligible. Also, if you have a 529C, you can convert your 529C to a 529A, and that may be a good thing because some of our kids may or may not go to college. So 529A can pay for college, and anything else is construed as being, you know, achieving a better life for an individual for a disability. But a 529C can only pay for college. So if your child might not go to college, it might be better to convert it over to the 529A, but we can help with all of those types of things. So let's see, do we have any questions on that, Gail?
We have some more questions though. Instead of reading the red book for individual planning one, call the Social Security and request benefits planning through the work incentive planning and assistant WIPA program or ticket to work program. Somebody.
Yes, Ticket to Work, that's one of them. Ticket to Work, I mean, that is definitely a program, and that is going to be talked about. The Ticket to Work program is definitely going to be talked about in the red book, for sure.
Good. Okay, what if my child is gainfully employed and loses SSI? Can my child still continue to receive medical services and any other services? What if the child loses his job later?
So there are limits as far as where you could keep the Medicaid. You don't lose Medicaid right away. So, you know, he can keep the Medicaid, but he would lose his SSI monthly benefits. And if he loses his job later and, you know, he's still disabled, then you just would reapply if they lost everything altogether. But again, if they can be gainfully employed, then we want that for them, and we want them to try. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to get through these last couple of slides because they're important. And then if we have time for a few more questions, then I'll take those. So items that an ABLE account can pay for, basically, one question that I get all the time, and I'll just summarize this right now. Why do I need an ABLE account, and why do I need a special needs trust? If I can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust, and I can only have $100,000, and I can only put $15,000 a year into an ABLE account, which is nothing, why do I need both? And basically the reason you need both is because housing and rent can be paid out of an ABLE account, and it can't out of a special needs trust. So housing and rent, mortgage payments, monthly bill pay, those type of food and housing, food and shelter, which is what SSI is supposed to pay for, it can be paid out of an ABLE account. So if you're you have a loved one in a residential facility or other places like that, and they have a room and board charge, which they usually do, then you basically can't pay for that out of the special needs trust. So most families have both. Most of them have a special needs trust and an ABLE account, and that's the reason why. But again, the only thing you need to remember is if it could even remotely be construed as achieving a better life for the individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account, okay? So it could be a vacation. It could be, it could be just about anything. So, and you can pay for just about anything out of a special needs trust too. A trust can own a house outright. It just can't pay the monthly debt service. So that's kind of the getting in the weeds on that, on the special needs trust. Okay, so developing a future care plan for your child, that's where we come in to play. We develop these future care plans. How much money are you going to need? How much money is it going to cost for future care? What if my child lives 20 or 30 years past me? So how much does that cost? How much do we need to set aside? Are we going to have enough to retire and be retired for 25 or 35 years and still have enough to fund our child's care and their needs? So, we put these plans together, and we're able to come up with dollars and cents on that, even down to when and how you should take your Social Security of delaying versus not delaying, those kinds of things. We also do comprehensive Social Security analysis, and our software is designed for families with kids with disabilities. We have the only software out there that has it. So where we can do the disabled adult child calculation, and we're calculating if we have a non-working spouse, we're able to calculate all of it, not just one of who and when should take what. Okay, so we can really nail that down, because that's $1 million question, and we can definitely put that in black and white for you. I would also say consider touring care facilities for partial, full residential day-hab. I should have day-hab on here, so I'm not saying we want you to institutionalize your child or anything like that, but consider how you are, how you feel, and how your ability, and how you are, how you feel, and what your ability might be when you're 65, 70, or 75. Consider what you want for your own retirement. Consider what might be good and healthy for them, and start touring some of these places and learning about some of these transition programs and other things out there, because sometimes the waiting list can be 5 years or longer. That was before COVID, and then it got worse with COVID. So, some of them do have openings, because a lot of people had compromised immune systems. So where some places had 5-year waiting lists before COVID, then they may have lost a lot of residents where parents and families were scared, so they pulled them out of there. So they're, just get on their list, and just because you come up on their list doesn't mean that you have to take the slot, but at least you have some options. And then we like to say that we want you to make careful consideration before naming siblings as a future caregiver. We like a sibling to be a future trustee. When you can't be the trustee of the trust anymore, maybe they're maybe they're a successor guardian, but they're the successor trustee, and they find appropriate care for their siblings, so they can still be siblings and have that loving relationship, and not one of kind of an obligation or this obligatory thing that actually could cause havoc for their life. Because some people, I always just say, think about how you were when you were in your young 20s, not the bad parts, the good parts. Like, you had hopes and dreams. You wanted to buy a house, you wanted to graduate college, and you had career aspirations and all of those things. And our other kids without disabilities have those things too. And imagine if you became the caregiver, the full-time caregiver of your special needs sibling in your 20s or early 30s, and might have just totally altered and changed the trajectory of your life and then what you wanted. So that's why we say that. It's not that the siblings don't love each other, or that maybe your kids don't think it's obligatory or anything like that, but just think that all the way through. All right, so these are some things. We've talked about a lot of things, and a lot of these things and we talk about them. We have a YouTube channel. We have a station that has all of our past recordings. So we have recordings on basically every little thing on this radar. But these are things that should be on your planning radar. It's a lot to take in. We've talked about a lot of information today, and it's and we really try to put information out there on a pretty regular basis, usually weekly, just to educate you, so you can self-educate yourself. You're not having to pay for this information. But check out our YouTube channel and see what's out there. If you're thinking about guardianship, or you want to know more about special needs trust, or you want to know about like somebody was talking about, like that Summer Earn and Learn program, or the Texas Workforce Solutions, Texas Workforce Commission's VR, vocational rehab. You want to know about that? We have a lot of them out there. We've partnered with Andy Hardwick with the Social Security Administration. We are certified. I am a national certified Social Security advisor. So we do go deep and wide with this. It is a lot to take in. All of their resources out there on the internet. Sometimes it's sifting through it, which is that's a job in itself. But it's been my pleasure to be here with you today. Gail, if we could take just one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right. So I'm wondering when my husband gets Medicare at retirement, does my daughter is entitled to Medicare from my dad? Right now, she has Medicaid and private insurance from my dad.
After 2 years, she will be eligible for Medicare. So if he is retired or disabled, then yes.
After 2 years, okay. What is my spousal benefit reduced? Why is my spousal benefit reduced? I'm a caregiver of a DAC. I retired about 18 months before full retirement age. SSA says caretaker of a DAC spousal benefit is never decreased regardless of age. Is family max the problem? My daughter receives SSDI because she has worse credits.
So if we have dad getting benefits, mom's getting benefits, the child's getting benefits, it's probably the family maximum. And that would be an offline thing I'd have to talk to you about, because it sounds like it's probably a family maximum that you could be hitting. So that could be the issue. I mean, your benefit would only be slightly reduced if your full retirement age was 67 and you took it at 66 in a few months or whatever. It's not like a drastic reduction from age 62 to age 67 like you would see that drastic reduction in early, taking it early.
How would a UTMA account that my daughter does not yet have control of, she would get control at age 21, affect her ability to get benefits? If I get the assets out of UTMA before she turns 21, or even now before she turns 18, would the investments in the UTMA account still count against her and apply for benefits?
Well, and that depends on what the child's age is, and that's another one-off too. But those UGMA, the UTMA and the UGMA accounts are a problem. Okay, they are. They are a problem because they do transfer the ownership at age 21. It's their money, so that would be counted against them. So something does need to happen with that particular account. Whereas a 529C, okay, it's in the parent's name, and the child is the beneficiary, but the parent is an owner of a 529C. The disabled individual is an owner of the 529A. So you could actually have a 529C in your disabled child that you don't intend to use for that disabled child. Maybe you're going to change the beneficiary later, and that 529C wouldn't be used against them for SSI purposes unless you made a distribution from the 529C for the benefit of the disabled child. So it definitely gets hairy there. And so for the sake of everybody's time, we always really try to end on time. And so I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today. If you have additional questions that we didn't get to today, I apologize, but you can feel free to email us, reach out to us at contact@cpgcares.net. And you can find us on Facebook and our YouTube channel, and you can kind of scroll through any of those other webinars that you may have missed. We always record. So thanks so much, Gail. It's been a pleasure being with you again today, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thanks so much.